that Jesus tells and Jesus shares. And so we're going to try to do our best with this odd little parable that's easy to just try to skip over because I probably spent many years of my life trying to figure out what it actually means. I think the more you in a certain city, and he said the judge neither feared God or cared about people. And there was a widow in that city came to this judge who didn't fear God or care about people, repeatedly saying, "Give me justice in this dispute with my enemy." And the judge ignored her for a while, but finally he said to himself, "Well, I don't fear God or really care about people, but this woman's driving me crazy. So I'm going to see that she gets what she wants, the justice, because she's just wearing me out with her constant requests." And then the Lord said, "Learn a lesson from this unjust judge. Even he rendered a just decision in the end. So don't you think that God will surely give justice to his chosen people who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will grant to them justice quickly. But when the Son of Man returns, how many will he find on the earth who have faith?" Literally, that says in the Greek, will he find faith on the earth? And so that little story is what we're going to talk about this morning. I think one of the things that helps as we read the story, you can go back to the first slide, is in it's confusing, somewhat hard parable to understand. Two things that help us is when we read parables, they aren't about us, they're about the heart of God, which we kind of get that toward the end of this parable, because Jesus compares himself to, in contrast to the unjust judge. Two, in this particular parable, we have Jesus telling us why he told the parable. So he says, so if we can't understand it, we at least want to know, or at least can understand. When one day Jesus told his disciples a story, and the story was going to show that they should unceasingly pray and don't lose heart. Don't give up, don't lose heart. So we know he told this story to talk about a posture of prayer, and he told it to people who maybe want to give up, and they are struggling to give up. I also believe the last verse, which you don't need to go to that slide, tells us that he told this parable because he's got this question that when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on the earth? And so those two things, I think, will help guide us as we work through this parable. There's something in this parable that's going to talk to us about the heart of God that should move us toward prayer. And there's something about the heart of God that should cause us not to lose hope. We're going to learn something about God. We're going to learn something about Christ that will move us to prayer and move us to not lose hope. And so I think it'll move us to faith. Will the Son of Man find faith on the earth? There is something about the heart of God. There's something about the person of Jesus that will cause us to cry out, not in hopelessness, but in great faith. So we know that, but now we got this story, and maybe we can make a little sense of the story with that. This is a frustrating story for us. We can relate, certainly, to, we're probably meant to relate with everybody in this particular parable. But we look out in the world and, we see something about the heart of God that he longs for justice. And I think that's the twist here in the parable. But we all long for justice. And yet we look out in the world in which we live and we don't see any justice. We, in a few months, really soon, are going to celebrate Christmas, and people will be proclaiming peace on earth and goodwill toward men. And when we look at the world in which we live, we don't see peace on earth and goodwill toward men. But not only do we not see that in the world in which we live, we don't need to go into just in the world which we live. We can go into our own personal lives and our own personal stories. And there are things our heart cries out for. There are places of injustice in our lives. Every heart seeks justice. Every heart wants something made right. I mean, if you're on social media, you don't have to go far to see that if people want to know, you want to know what people's statuses are in their own personal life. Most of the time, if you just spend any time reading, they're wanting some justice in some form of arena. And they're, because we complain on social media. We complain about our exes on social media. We complain about children, and we want justice for our kids. They weren't treated right in the lunchroom. They weren't treated right at school. You weren't treated right when you got pulled over by that cop. You weren't treated right in the custody. And needless to say, that solution always breaks bad. Prayer, what is going on here? I think two things. Jesus told us that there's something about the heart of God which should move us to prayer and should also move us to not lose heart and to not give up. So what is going on here? And I think you get this idea that there is this posture of prayer that is not ceasing. And I found even the passages on prayer: ask and it will be given unto you. One of the things that is interesting in that other verse in the Gospels, and I think those are words of Christ: ask and it will be given to you. Do you know in those verses it never says what will be given to you? And I think that's helpful here. It's helpful in that posture. I do think there is an element here that this place of faith, when the Son of Man comes, will he find this posture of faith? This posture of faith that's giving up control to God, which, by the way, should not confine us. It should free us. Jesus tells us that we should become like little children. Little children. Little children, my daughter had her birthday party a few weeks back, and she had friends over, and one of her friends has a boy. He's probably 3 or 4 now. His name is Trip, and he is the cutest little guy. But he comes, so he's the little guy, and he's the only little guy that comes in, the house, and he comes bouncing in, and I've been around him, but he doesn't necessarily um, know me that well. But he knows he's coming for dinner, and dinner. I don't even remember what dinner was. Yeah, we had orange chicken or something that night because that's what Christina wanted or whatever. But he doesn't really know what we're having for dinner. But he's a kid. And he comes in and he knows he's coming for dinner. And he walks in the door and he walks in and he figures out I'm kind of the guy of the house or whatever. He just walks up to me and he just cuts to the chase. Is there dessert? He hasn't even seen the food yet. Where's the dessert? I'm here for dessert. I want dessert, and as parents, we think, oh man, I'm a bad parent. I got to get control of that kid. How rude for him to come. Well, you know what he's doing? He's just coming in and asking what's on his heart. He wants dessert. He reminded me of my son Noah. So Noah is my youngest son, and when we first moved here, his older brother played baseball. And so we would go down the road here at Bicentennial Park. And, as Reese is playing baseball, we're usually involved with Reese. But it's a park and there's a playground. So we let our kids play in the playground. And I would look up at Noah. And Noah at Bicentennial, I don't know if they still do this because I haven't been there in a few years. But one of the little things they sell in their concession stands is taco in a bag. And it's just Fritos with some taco sauce. They crunch it up. And Noah loves taco in a bag. And of course, he loves candy. And week after week, I'm telling you, this was true. I would see Noah, and Noah would have taco in a bag, and he'd be walking around with it. And Noah doesn't have any money. Like, where did you get? So Noah's like 3 or 4 years old, and he's walking around with candy. He's walking around with taco in the bag. Get that? How can you even go up to the counter? I said, where did you get the money? Because I didn't give you any money. He goes, oh, I just started asking people for dollars. And they gave it to him. Yeah, that man over there, he gave me $1. I said, why did he give you? Because I asked him. I wanted taco in a bag. So I asked him. I actually think we become so mature in our Christian spirituality that we don't go around just asking God that we want taco in a bag. I do think that's part of it, that there is this faith, there is this adventure that comes, there's this freedom that comes in our relationship with God. And, we take our prayers and we begin to lose heart. One, because, I don't know, how many people probably told my son no before he got it, but I don't think he cared. He's just going on to the next person. We've got this version of Christian maturity that where we hide our actual desire maturity. And I think one of the things is saying is our heart should actually reflect the heart of God. And the heart is big and it is huge. But we bury our prayers, we bury our desires, we actually quit praying. Quit praying is because we actually are confused about what prayer is all about, and we feel like we have just been given the cold shoulder by God over and over again. And you know what? If I just don't pray for this, I won't be disappointed. I just won't be disappointed. Again and again and again. So I'll just kind of clear my mind, and I'm getting here to the heart of God. But the heart of God is here, and in the midst of it, he's saying, no, you can come to my and you can give me your hearts, and you can give me your desires. I said last week, will the Son of Man find faith upon the earth? Subbing out of that ethereal term faith, plus nothing equals everything on the earth. That's the heart of this parable. And what he is saying is in your prayers for fairness and justice, you no longer have to seek to be right. You're actually just seeking the heart of the Father, because he talks about, the heart of the unrighteous judge. We have the heart of the Father. When Jesus comes back, will he find Jesus plus nothing equals everything on the earth? Will he find a ferociousness and a tenacity on the earth for Jesus and Jesus himself? Will he find hearts through prayer that grow stronger? Look, Jesus prayed in Gethsemane. He prayed 3 times for a cup to pass from him. And that prayer was not answered in the way that Jesus wanted it answered in that moment. But the Father's will was done, which is what Jesus ultimately wanted. We know from the book of Corinthians that Paul himself prayed 3 times for a thorn in the flesh to be removed from him. And that thorn in the flesh was not removed from him. And we get from Paul maybe even a clearer explanation that as he prayed and he was persistent in his prayer and his answer didn't come in the form that he wanted, what he then concluded is in his persistency and is in the persistency of the non-answered prayer, what he had come to realize that he was being given what he was asked for. And what he was asked for was powerlessness, because it was in his weakness that he would find Christ, that Christ's strength would be made perfect in his weakness. And to be persistent in that is to be persistent in finding Christ. All the passages in this week's lectionary were beautiful in this. We read one of the passages, Psalm 121. It was a psalm for this week. Where do I look for help? My help comes from the Lord who made the heavens and the earth. And you know what? You can be so persistent with him because he neither slumbers nor sleep. And he will be with you from your goings out, both now and forevermore, because he's the persistent God. Timothy, Paul's last words to Timothy are the other section, and Paul is ready to die, and he's given Timothy one last charge, and he's saying, Timothy, do not ever lose the message of Jesus plus nothing equals everything. You've been taught that from when you were a child. You persevere with patience in that faith. You persevere in that message. Paul goes on to tell Timothy, and again, this is so backwards, and actually when you read Timothy, you begin to see it. You grow up, if you grow up in the church and you're a pastor, and people are asking, or people actually tell me all the time that I'm just a preacher who gives people itching ears. I give the itching ears what they want to hear. You know what the itching ears wanted to hear in Timothy? They wanted to hear anything but Jesus plus nothing equals everything. That's what the itching ears wanted to hear. They never say it, but for those who always mock the message of Jesus plus nothing equals everything, or say they don't believe in Jesus plus nothing equals everything, I want to say, well, you have itching ears. You have itching ears. Because Paul says those itching ears always want to be turned toward themselves, not toward faith. Jesus in this parable wants us to live a life that is free and unstoppable, and trust that we have a relentless God. We don't know what he's up to. You don't know what he's up to. Jesus again is on his way to Jerusalem, where justice is coming speedily and quickly and fastly to him. Justice is coming to him. It's really not justice, but is justice, because our sins deserve justice. And justice is meted out upon God and on Christ as he makes his way to Jerusalem, as he engages his way to Jerusalem. And the pattern here, I think, is one of forgiveness. I think it's what the widow missed. I was reading this week that like over 10 years ago, I don't know if you remember, there was a man who walked into an Amish school and killed children there. He told the boys to leave the room, and he tied 10 girls up, and he shot all 10 of them, and 5 of them died. And 10 years later, they did an article in the Washington Post of the mom of the killer. And the mom of the killer said she'd heard about the shooting and was on her way home, and her husband's standing in their driveway with tears in his eyes and said, "It was our son. It was our son. It was our son." She then talks about them going the day to bury their son in utter humiliation and a disgrace. And 30 of those Amish people showed up at her son's funeral. In her home, she has something that just says "forgiven" in large letters. She then tells the story that their forgiveness of her allowed her to enter the lives of one of the girls that lived and didn't die, but was completely handicapped, has to be fed, has to be bathed. And every week on Thursday night, the mom of the killer goes and bathes this little girl. And these were her words at the end of the article. "On that day, I could never have predicted what God would do with that. I could never predict what God would do with forgiveness." Don't lose heart. Don't lose heart for those circumstances that you're in, that you unceasingly want to change, and that you think need to be changed because you have this plan, because you don't know what God is doing. But keep running to Him. Keep pleading Him that He would show up. Don't lose heart. He is not deaf to you. There was an unjust judge. There was a widow that I don't think Jesus was necessarily presenting in a great light. And you know what Jesus is revealing in the parable? He's the right judge, and He's the right widow. Because here's the good news. Here's the good news for you and for me. The good news for you and for me is we haven't been bold enough. We haven't been persistent enough. We haven't been good enough. We have not prayed unceasingly. We have not lived with the ferocity of Jesus plus nothing equals everything. But you know who the relentless widow is in the story? He's God Himself. Because He's relentlessly over and over and over again pursuing you, and He is pursuing me. His goodness, His grace, and His mercy will hunt us down, pursue us all the days of our life, and we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That is the posture of the widow. Her goodness and her grace will follow us, will follow the injustice, will follow a people that this week, every one of us was rebellious. God is the most perfect Father in all of the universe, and guess what? Every one of His kids is rebellious. So take heart, parents. Don't let anyone tell you if you have your rebellious children that it's your fault, because I know a perfect Father, and every one of His kids is rebellious. And He is the perfect widow who takes and pursues His rebellious kids over and over and over again. Goodness and mercy and grace and love all the days of our life. He's the relentless widow, and He is the righteous judge. And on His way to Calvary, justice was met. And it frees us. In our moments where we want justice, to offer forgiveness. When when the Son of Man returns, will he find a tenacity and a ferocity of Jesus plus nothing equals